so I don't scare the people with static. There we are. What a great day, huh? I hope somebody counted the number of kids here, because that was pretty cool. How many were there? 19. Yeah, we should be pretty excited about that. I can remember my very first Sunday here just over a year ago. I had to hunt down the children. We had stored them in a room down the hall to the left. And there were 6. And we had 19 today. A couple of weeks ago, we had 24. There's good news coming. 120 years ago, as a result of a protracted evangelistic summer meeting, combined with a good Baptist woman being kicked out of her church for taking communion with those heretical disciples, and a husband who knew right from wrong, First Christian Church of Duncanville began being the place where God things happen. Today our purpose, this is the good news, is not fivefold. It's not even threefold. Our purpose today is pointed and singular. Our purpose today is to celebrate being that place. So somebody say, praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord.
To do that, we've found a great cloud of witnesses to share their stories with us. People who have lived and served here at First Christian Church Duncanville with great love and passion for being the place where God things happen. So I invite you today to sit back. I never ask people to relax before the sermon. So sit back and get ready to enjoy the stories, the love, and the passion for Jesus Christ, and celebrate with us. We have some witnesses. Our first witness is somebody you all know. Well, in fact, you know all of the witnesses. That's one of the best parts, is that you know these folks who are coming to share their lives with us. Our first has served, from what I understand, as the first full-time pastor of this congregation. He made a whopping $100 a week. Wow. David Freeman served this congregation. Not only did he serve this congregation, but he came to love the people and the community. And he decided he was never leaving. So he's coming this morning. David, would you come and share with us some of your story? It's all right. I would welcome him with some round of applause or something.
First off, I was not the first full-time minister. They had a lot of full-time ministers from the very, not from the very beginning, but later in the church. In fact, Don McKenzie, if I understand correctly, was the first full-time minister that we had.
Just slide over in front of the microphone just a
okay.
little bit.
Excuse me there. Usually I don't need a mic, but I want to make a commercial. It wouldn't be a church meeting if we didn't do something like that. But is Judy Purcell here?
Way in the back.
Raise your hand there, Judy. John Stewart was the first before Don. Okay, thank you very much. And she's our historian, so that makes it right. She wrote a book on the history of the church. Fantastic book. Obviously, I read it, but I didn't read it carefully, Judy. I scanned through it. No, seriously, it is a wonderful book, starting from the very beginning of the church until through 1983. 93. Yeah, 93. We do not have any copies left. They sold out very quickly, but we do have a copy in the library, and would highly recommend to you, if you want to know more about the history of the church, to go in there and check it out and read it, because we're only going to cover the last 50 years. First off, everyone before there is not still living, except for Don McKenzie is still living, of the past ministers. I have some bad news for you today. I forgot my watch.
In 4 minutes, Glenn, tap him on the shoulder.
Well, no, the good news is Sandra is already instructed to let me know when my 5 minutes is up. And she's not waving hello at me. She's telling me to shut up and get down. But here goes, and the clock doesn't start till now, Sandra. I felt like that it was important. They asked us to go back 50 years. And actually, there was a minister before me, Aaron Barker, and he was would be within that 50-year period. And there were two things that happened during his ministry that I feel like is definitely worth mentioning. Number one, they started what was called the Builders Luncheon, and it was started by Francis Langford. And back then, city of Duncanville was really having a lot of growth. And as a result, we had a lot of builders here in this area who were building new homes and things of that nature. And so they started a builder's luncheon. And it was a tremendous success. As you know, since the women were in charge of it, you know the food was good. And secondly, it was very profitable, because the builders were very grateful for the opportunity to come and have lunch together and share, like I say, in good food. Also, according to the history book on Aaron's, when he was here, and the women will be interested in this, the first church bazaar was started when Aaron was still a minister here. How many of you knew that? How many women knew that? The first bazaar was then. Now, here's the other side of the coin. They did it 1 year, then quit. And I figured you women would appreciate that, because that is an awful lot of work. When I was called to be the minister here, I knew Sandra and I were born and raised in Fort Worth, so we knew of the area. We wanted to get back in the area. And we knew that there was a lot of growth potential here. So the only condition I had in coming, because the $100 a week wasn't all that attractive, but seriously, the reason we came back was to be back in this area, and I only had one request, and that was that they have a secretary, because I knew there was going to be a lot of growth here. And I neither had the skills nor should not even be involved in the secretarial part, more so than the growth of the church. And that was probably the best decision, not only that I've made in reference to my church life, but probably one of the best decisions I've ever made, other than obviously asking Sandra to marry me. But they had... The only thing I can say is Thelma is my best friend and has been ever since I first came here. Because Thelma Fouts was the one that they had picked to be my secretary. Thelma, if you're here today, just raise your hand. Oh, there she is right there. Wow. we not only developed a great relationship then, but it has continued over these years. And a real funny story. It may not be as funny to you now because I don't know how many Brandenburgs are left. If there's any, are there anybody here that's a descendant of the Brandenburgs well, back then, the Brandenburgs, I mean, they were all over Duncanville. And so anyway, I was sitting down with Thelma my first week here and going through the roster and getting her to tell me a little bit about each one of the families and everything. But she said, well, before we start, let me tell you one thing. And I said, what's that? She said, don't say anything bad about a Brandenburg, because you're probably talking to one of them. And sure enough, I had two lovely women in the congregation that did not have the last name Brandenburg, but they were definitely a Brandenburg. There were a lot of them around at that time. There's two highlights, I guess, that I should mention. Number one is the memorial book that we have. If you haven't seen it, it's back in the foyer where you go between the church and Sunday school and everything. And there's a stand there that has a memorial book. And we established that in order to give honor and tribute to loved ones in the church who had died, and people could contribute to that, and we recorded it in the book in their name. And it's been a lot over the years to the church. And Annelle Buckner, Annelle, where are you? She's back at the back. She's in charge of it now and has done a wonderful job of reinstating interest in the memorial book. And then finally, you walk through these doors here and you go that whole wing, and the fellowship hall was a building project that we did here at the church. I could tell a lot of stories on that, but Santa hadn't raised her hand yet, so I can tell a few of them. First off, before we added that, has it already been 5 minutes? Okay, I'll make it quick. When we built this building here, the fellowship hall where they had their meetings and Sunday school and everything was a frame house on the corner. And when we tore it down, there was a railroad car door. Any of you that have ever been around the old railroad cars and know those doors, they're heavy as all get out. And one of the things that we found in tearing that building down is they had taken a railroad car door, which, like I say, was pretty heavy, and they had attached it and then nailed sheetrock on it, and that was the wall for 2 of the classrooms. And it was a lot of fun getting rid of that railroad car, I can promise you. Secondly, when we finished with the project here, by the way, we went through all of that, never had a disagreement at all. Everything went smooth as silk. And then when we sat down, Charles Battenberg, by the way, donated all of his time. He was a painter, and he painted all of the building and everything on his own time and donated that to us. Well, when it came time to color the accent walls on the Sunday school class, everything went great. But when we started trying to decide on what color each wall was going to be, that's when all hell broke loose. And you know how it is. And Charles finally stood up and he said, look, y'all decide what your color you want. Tell me later. I'm leaving. And he literally walked out of the meeting. But he did contribute his work, and I appreciated it. The church appreciated it very much. One other thing, we did, the outreach committee donated a resuscitator to the city of Duncanville because they didn't have one, and it was donated and it kept in the fire department. And one evening while I was here, Sandra, I had a fainting spell in the house and scared the fool out of me because she'd never fainted before. And so I'm trying to get her awake, and she's not responding. And Kim, our oldest daughter, is about 4 or 5 years old then, and I hollered at Kim, and she came around the corner, and I said, Kim, get on the phone and call the fire department. And so she ran to the phone, and then she stopped and came back and said, Dad, why are we calling the fire department? Of course, she didn't know that they were the ones that had to resuscitate her. But Sandra had come to by then, and we were in good shape. My time's up, so no more stories, but I do have to tell one in introducing Jim Elam. Jim Elam and I went to seminary together, and it was a custom of, it was just a custom that when you had served a church and you were no longer the minister, it was a courtesy to go to another congregation. And I called Jim and, told him that Sandra and I would relocate if he would like for us to. And Jim, I owe you big time. Because Jim's answer was, hey, I want you to stay. I want you to be a part of this. And for 43 years, Sandra and I have experienced love from this congregation because there was love when we came, and there's still love today. And it's always going to be a loving congregation. And Jim, you'll be happy to know the Cowboys play at 12 o'clock today, and it's not going to be your fault that we're running late, okay? I used to tease Jim about always preaching an extra 5 minutes or so whenever there was a 12 o'clock kickoff. Well, back then, that was pretty serious because Cowboys were winning championships. Today, it's no big deal, okay? Jim Elam.
David Freeman's a lot like my wife. Time just a 4-letter word to him.
Before I start, how many of you even remember me here at all? Well, that's pretty good. We've all outlived it then. 40 years ago, almost to the day, we moved to Duncanville and moved into the church had a parsonage at that time, a very, very small parsonage. We had 2 of our kids. Matthew was one of them. He's here today. Mary Beth was our girl. And we had a foster child, Joanne. So we had three kids. And we had lived in a larger parsonage before that, and we had a lot of furniture. And when we moved into that parsonage, we had to put half of the furniture in the garage because we couldn't get it in the house. So while we were moving in, though, the chairman of the board came to me and said, I need to tell you something. We didn't underwrite our budget this year. Now, to a new minister coming to a new church, that's about as bad as you can get in terms of news of the church. We didn't underwrite our budget this year. Well, we started in good faith and worked. And within a few years, we had our Covenant of Faith program based on the need of the giver to give, not to give to a budget, but the need to be a good steward. And we ended up in good shape financially through those years. Some of the things that happened while I was here was that we had 2 other girls born while we were here. And so we were very oriented towards children's ministry. So my wife started the Mother's Day Out program here at the church. And at that time, Duncanville was growing, and a lot of young families were moving into town. And I guess we were one of the first churches in town to have the Mother's Day Out program because it was very, very successful. We had a lot of young couples and their children sign up for that program. And then an interesting thing happened. The parents would bring the kids to the Mother's Day Out, and then after a while they said, well, we need to get the kids in church, in Sunday school. So they started bringing the kids to our Sunday school program. But then, after a length of time like that, they decided, well, wait a minute, it's too much trouble for us to drop them off and come back and pick them up, so why don't we just stay for Sunday school ourselves? And they did, and they started getting comfortable here. And before you knew it, all of these couples started joining the church. And we ended up with some of the best church people in the world, these young couples. They were very devoted. And one of the things that happened to me was during that period of time, we decided to have a lay witness mission, and then we followed that by a Dare to Be Disciples program. And a lot of those young couples participated in that. In fact, it was sort of a renewal for all of us. We'd been raised in the church, and we'd been in the church all those years. And all of a sudden, we all started feeling different about it, about the mission of the church. And I remember one morning about 6 o'clock, I got up and I walked here from our home, and right in the middle of that aisle, center aisle, I fell on my knees and I said, God, I've sort of been in charge all this time, but I'm going to let you take over from here on. And that was a turning point in my ministry, if not in my life, right there in that center aisle. The next Sunday, people said, Jim, you look different. You sound different. And from that point on, my life was different. One of the joys of Duncanville for me has been not only the place where two of our children were born, but after a while we bought our first home here on Parkwood Circle. And on Parkwood Circle there were a lot of young families, and a lot of those young families ended up joining the church here. And we had a great community out there, especially with Halloween coming up. My kids, it's one of the lasting memories of my life is my kids on Halloween going trick-or-treating there on Parkwood Circle. I guess one of the most significant things that happened was that we finally were able to buy this land out here and complete the block. And seeing the magnificent building you have built since then gives me great pleasure to know that I was just a little bit of a part of that. So it's good to be back. My wife, Mary Alice, sends her love. She's the one, by the way, that helped start the Mother's Day Out program with me. So we're glad to be here, and the first time I've been here since I left. Went to Longview from here. This place prepared me for Longview. I served there for 25 years, retired in 2001. So it's been a good ministry, and you've been a part of it. Thank you.
So we started planning this event, and we decided we would invite people to come and speak, and I was charged with inviting the next speaker, who said, I can't come. That's kind of how I felt. He said, and you should know that I can't come. And then I remembered that I actually knew that he couldn't come, because for a year and a half he's had a trip planned on this weekend. Any other weekend of the whole year, we could have had this event, and Eldon could have probably joined us. He sends his love from Mississippi, or the Mississippi River anyway. He's there with actually some of our church members and many other good friends as they travel by the steam sternwheeler. So we had to do the next best things. So we found 3 people to replace Eldon. And the first is Stanley. Stanley, would you come up and share with us what you've been invited to share? Yes. Carolyn, are you running his clock back there? All right.
I know my place. You don't have to clap. Carolyn and I and our 3 daughters, Shannon, Terry, and Tony, joined this church in 1976. There was a young minister who was just starting his ministry at this church, and his name was Eldon Irving, and he had a new bride named Gloria. So we kind of started with his ministry at this church. After we got settled in the church, Eldon came to us and wanted us to be the youth sponsors. And he had a trip already planned that we could do. It was a heritage trip of the South, of the disciples of Christ. And he was all excited about it, having been a youth leader, and wanted us to do it. And we had a great group of kids. And I said, well, you know, Carolyn and I are from a Methodist background. I don't know anything about the disciples of Christ. So I'll do it if Sandra and David Freeman, who were one of the reasons we joined the church, the main reason we joined this church with their influence and their girls' friendship with our girls, if they'll be co-sponsors, we'll do it. They agreed. So we started having meetings to plan this heritage trip. We were into it 6 weeks. I had bus schedules and places to stay and etc. So we had our Sunday afternoon meeting with the kids, and this one boy held up his hand. He said, Mr. Scott, can I say something for the group? And I said, well, sure. He said, when are we going to quit planning some dumb trip nobody wants to go on? Well, we went into an immediate emergency committee session. So Carolyn and Sandra and David and I agreed, so we came back and I said, well, we're making an executive decision of right now that trip is canceled. And the kids clapped. And I said, well, what do you want to do? And they said, we want to go on a snow skiing trip. I said, well, guys, you know, we've never snow skied. Well, it didn't make any difference. They wanted to go on it. So I went and talked to Eldon. He was snow skier himself, so he thought, well, that'd work. He was disappointed. So we did honor what they wanted to do, and that year we had a busload of 36 people that went snow skiing to Angel Fire. Just one problem, 30 of us on that bus had never been skiing in our life. So we had a great trip, but one story out of that, a couple stories. One, Roland Paul's daughter, Lisa, on the front of the mountain was a little lift, and you got off halfway if you were a beginner, and you went up the top if you knew what you were doing. We didn't know what we were doing at that point, but I was riding with Lisa, and she didn't get off, so I couldn't get off. So we go to the top. Of course, being an adult and controlled, wanting to show a good example, I turned to her and I said, we're going to die, Lisa, and it's your fault. Obviously, I didn't die. Another great memory from that ski trip was about the 3rd year we were going to Winter Park, Colorado. And there was a young man in this church named Jason Bowles. And he started when he was in junior high, had MS showed up, and he was deteriorating through the years. His parents, Buddy and Lynn Bowles, approached us and said, could Jason go on the trip and be a part of the trip? Well, he could barely walk. He had a walker, and he struggled, but he could walk just a little bit. So we said yes, and they went. So when we got to Winter Park, we were unloading and going to the ski lodge. They have a big place with windows, and you can watch everybody ski. And we were walking Jason in there, and a ski instructor came up to me and said, "Is that boy in your group?" And I said, "Yes, he is." He said, "How long are you going to be here?" And I said, 3 days. He said, "If you'll give me that boy, the third day, he'll ski down that beginner hill there." And I went, "There's not a way in the world that's going to happen." He said, "I'm used to working with handicapped skiers. That's what we have a program here in Winter Park." So let me talk to the parents. They said, "Give it a try." He said, "Come back the third day at 3 p.m. and he will come down that mountain." At 3 p.m. the third day, we lined up. I thought it'd be a little sled or something they'd bring him down. They didn't. Jason Bowles skied down that mountain, and when he got to the bottom, he was beaming, and I was crying. Carolyn started crying, Sandra started crying, David started crying, all the kids started crying, Jason's parents were crying, and I know it was a weird scene because here's this kid just beaming and happy, and 34 people crying. By the next year, he was only in a wheelchair, so we couldn't do it again. Jim, Elam, and David have made reference to the Mother's Day Out. And Eldon jumped on that and made that a big part of his ministry to this church and the outer community. But that program was really successful because of one other person. And that person is Lorraine Turpin. And she only handled that for 22 years. Stand up, Lorraine. 22 years. I also had the privilege of being chairman of the elders when we elected Lorraine Turpin to be the first female elder in this church. Good job. And that was very controversial at the time, and Eldon supported it, and it's great to be with her. Barbara?
Our next is a twofer. John and Barbara, come on up here. They're going to tell us some more about this story as we move forward.
We are going to combine our story in the way that has transpired. We are also scripted, so we're not going to stop. So, ladies and gentlemen, fasten your seatbelts, hang on to your hats, as John and I are going to zoom you through 25 years of our personal history under Eldon Irving's ministry at First Christian Church, Duncanville. If we talk fast, we get 10 minutes. We're going to try and do it in less than that. We have a limited period of time, and we're just going to be flipping. We're going to do it chronologically. John and his family joined the church on December 4th, 1977, and ironically, I joined the church on December 18th of that same year with my family. He sat in the back, I sat in the front. My early years with the church were devoted to our Christian Women's Fellowship, which provided me with spiritual growth, unconditional love, and lasting friendships with absolutely remarkable women.
In my early years, I was single, and I attended the couples Sunday school class, taught by David Freeman, despite the fact that I had no wife. And at one of our Sunday school class parties, they elected me president.
John never did follow rules.
Yeah, they pushed me to be railroaded me. So after they elected me president, I said, you know, I'm single. I think we need to change the name of the class. Well, it's now the friendship class, and David is teaching again. In 1981, while I was serving as a yearly stewardship chair, I was told about a single lady in the church. Since I was still single, I called her, and to make a long story short, 2.5 years later, this woman agreed to marry me, and Eldon married us in this church. That's the happiest day of my life. Now I'm going to skip a few years. In 1984, the land where the new building now sits was given to the church by Mary Conrad and Marjorie Wynn, which was, when that happened, in February of 1985, a building study group was formed and led by Bob Daniel, a longtime member of this church. In November of 1985, Ray Dean was now leading our building planning committee, and I was asked to chair the building fund drive. Didn't realize how long it would last, 9 years. A congregational meeting was called to approve going forward to build a church addition to accommodate a fellowship hall, a kitchen, additional classrooms, and offices. A generous gift was made by a lady that I loved, Hattie Mae Hoskins. She gave the church, the day that we had the approval to go forward, $100,000. And later on, she gave another $150,000 to the building fund. Stanley Scott, sitting here, headed up the loan committee to go out and borrow money to help us build the church. In early 1986, we had a congregational dinner at the Holiday Inn to accept pledges for the building fund. With these pledges and additional ones from others, we began planning construction with approximately $400,000 on hand. We estimated that the building was going to cost $800,000. Guy from Indianapolis told me we could not raise that much money, and I said, watch us.
In 1986, Eldon asked Jerry Hutton and I to facilitate a new singles ministry in our church. Jerry's background in counseling made him an able leader for the group, and I agreed to coordinate the social activities. Some things never change. It was open to the community and was well accepted and was very well attended. That was until a gentleman chewed me out royally for attending this group wearing a wedding band. Obviously, neither Eldon, Jerry, or I had ever thought that being an issue, of all three of us obviously being married people running a singles group. And it wasn't our intention to offer, it was just simply for singles event and to give them a place to meet and greet and socialize. A little faux pas on our part, but the group went on for a short time later.
In December of 1987, after extensive planning and with over 200 people in attendance, we broke ground right out here for our new building. And Don Cutler, who was a member of the church, was head of the building construction. A year later, by 1988, our building was completed, and a building dedication attended by 300 people was held, followed by a dinner in which my wife coordinated. A remodeling of the existing facilities, which includes this and all that classroom down there, was undertaken, and we completed it. The total cost of the new building and this building was $1 million.
In 1989 through 1991, during my term as president of our Christian Women's Fellowship, we designated a CWF banquet theme to honor and showcase what women wore past and present. Roy Turpin, who worked in the theater, provided authentic period costumes for us, from the flapper days to a Jackie Kennedy-style dress. With the intent of promoting this event and boosting our ticket sales, and totally unknown to anyone, including John, I changed into one of the period dresses to advertise our event. Everyone was already in church. I dressed out there, I slid around there, and I got caught back there by Don Cutler. And as he went, I said, "Shut up, Don." And I hid back in the cry room. So when the announcements were asked for, and it got quiet, I gaily pranced down the aisle of this church, and I was wearing a rather short black flapper dress, complete with a headband and an 8-inch long feather. Several wolf whistles later, and thankfully a lot of church humor, many tickets were sold that day, and our CWF had an extremely successful banquet. Unfortunately, I was not asked for a letter of withdrawal from our congregation. In 1992, in preparation for our 100th year celebration, Eldon charmed me into spearheading this milestone with an event each month for one full year. One event was our participation in Duncanville's 4th of July parade, where we had 100 church people marching, donned in FCC t-shirts. We had a birthday cake float that our younger people bought. We lined the children in on the tiers of the birthday cake. We had them with great big pointed hats with gold metallic that looked like candles. And in that, not only did we win an award for the day, but we were really the talk of the town because we were the largest entry, we were the most prominent entry, and it was truly a church banding together. It was remarkable. Kind of remind me again of this year's parade. Our final event for the year-end celebration, and remember, we had everything once a month, but these were the highlights. The final one was attended by 300 church members, local dignitaries, family, and friends. A highlight was the unveiling of our historical marker, made possible totally by Judy Jones Purcell, by her efforts. Numerous guests were present. Letters of congratulations were received from President Ronald Reagan, President-elect George Bush, and other prominent leaders. And the day was climaxed with the launching of a 100 balloon item thing for all of our kids. And I did learn just about a year ago, I went to try and research it. On the balloons, we attached a card, said, "We are from First Christian Church, we're celebrating 100 years. If you find this card, would you please let us know how far the balloon went?" I think it took 2.5 to 3 years to finally come back, and it was found in some cow pasture way out in Arkansas someplace. A farmer happened to get way out in his pasture and found the card. So that was the furthest one that we knew had taken place.
I would like to say it was my privilege to serve as usher for approximately 30 years during most of Eldon's, well, during all of Eldon's ministry, except for the first year, which I wasn't here. And the main thing I'd like to say, thanks to the love and commitment from our church members, the loan for this building, again, and remodeling, was $1 million. And we paid it off in 9 years. And I think that was approximately 1995. Barbara and I are so proud to be part of our church history, and we look forward to great things ahead for First Christian Church of Duncanville. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker covers the next pastor's tenure, and I will tell you that he didn't want to do it. Am I describing that correctly?
Yeah, I sing a lot better than
But Jeff comes to share with us as well today. Come on up here.
Well, they asked me up here to talk about Mike and his music ministry, but first of all, I noticed something during the other speakers here that I missed out on something. I was a member of this church a long time ago when I was in my teens, and we went on that heritage tour. I didn't know it was so easy to get a ski trip out. Well, let me start off with Mike and how I first met Mike. I just had my first heart attack, and I was in a hospital, and Mike came for his ministerial meeting, or how you doing type meeting at the church. I mean, at the hospital, and here I was in my hospital bed when in walks this rather burly man, and I just barely met him one day, I think, before that. And he said he was glad to meet me, and of course I said, yeah, I wish it was better circumstances. But next thing he asked me is, heard you play the guitar. And the next thing I know, even with the EKG machine plugged into me and tube sticking up in my arm and everything else, the preacher's is recruiting me for the praise team. So I didn't know at that time that I was signing up for a 6-year stint with the praise group. I enjoyed it very much. Mike and me would meet every Wednesday around 4:30 because it was really convenient for me to stop off by the church on Wednesdays because I was working in Arlington and it was on my way home, and we'd sit there and hash out these praise songs, which were new to me, and he always seemed to assume, oh, you know this song, don't you? And I always had to tell him, no, I've never heard this before. So we would work out the, seldom we had real music, like, real staffs and notes on a staff and G clef and F clef and actual key signature and everything else. We just had words on a piece of paper, and we were lucky if we had a video or a recording of the praise song to listen to before we tried to practice the song. Most of the time I had to listen to Mike sing it. And we'd sit there and work out these chords, and we'd say, well, let's try this. And no, that chord's not quite right. Well, how about this? And then we'd swap off back and forth trying to figure out what the right chord progression was for our praise group songs. It got a lot easier once we hooked on to CCLI, because they had all the chord signatures, and we could always change the key if we needed to. My general rule in praise team and with Mike was, please just keep it simple, stupid. Because I don't know, I'm not really that great of a musician, and it was always nice to have it easy for me because I had to say words and look at these pages too. Then. After 4:30 till about 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock was praise team time and practice time, and the praise members would show up for practice, and at least whoever did show up. Sometimes it was just me and Mike and a couple of praise team members, and we'd hash out a song and try a couple of different versions, but of the same song, and we'd try verse, second verse, and then chorus, and then refrain, and then he would change it up and say, well, let's do first verse, chorus, second verse, and then the refrain, but go back to first verse instead, and then do another chorus. Well, let's wait a minute. Let's do 2 choruses after that and go back to the, so it got rather confusing at times. But Sunday, we'd all, somehow, we'd get it all together, and sometimes without a repeat of a chorus, and we'd get away with it. A lot of the times you didn't realize out in the congregation that a lot of the times the praise group didn't know where we were or where Mike was. And one unsung member of the praise group, and he probably doesn't even know that he was a member, our phantom member was Bill Faulkner, who, if we ever got the words on time, if we ever got the right words to him on time, it was quite an achievement on the praise group's part. I know Mike loved to sing, and I'm sure he was happy to bring the praise style singing to our church. That was one change that we had in the church, and it was my honor. To continue the praise team as long as I could. When I continued the praise team, I brought a little bit more music to it. At least I had some music with staffs on it and notes. But I'd still want to change things and make repeats of chorus, verse, and maybe a chorus or 2 more. I won't forget the look on the praise team's face when I'd be sitting down here and I'd be playing away, and all of a sudden, Jeff went someplace else. So I know what Mike went through. And thank you for the opportunity of being the praise team leader. It was my pleasure.
I'm going to ask you to thank our speakers once more. The stories they shared weren't a complete history, but they are stories about and of people of faith. They're not unlike the stories that you find in Scripture. I would ask you to think with me about the underlying theme you heard today. I wrote this sermon, or this page, 2 weeks ago. And I put what the theme is here. And you heard it over and over again. I didn't know what they were all going to say, but I knew what they were going to say. The church isn't about money. It's not about being an institution. It's not even really about growing a church. It was to a person, if you listen to these stories, about relationships. Relationships with a God of grace and a church who loved him. Today we celebrate our heritage and we remember our past through the stories. Today we celebrate the love of God that motivated our founders and our servants through the years. Why do we celebrate? We celebrate because, as the prophet Jeremiah told us, and we claim today at First Christian Church of Duncanville, we have a future with a hope. Would you all say amen?